So, good morning to my team. It is another week of trying to communicate around the science of performance and the science of nutrition in the most practical ways. Today, we're delighted to have Amy with us to talk about her performance nutrition journey and unfortunately a bit of a setback that she's had that an awful lot of athletes tend to have. So we're going to be talking about her recovery and how we can support her from a nutrition point of view. But very quickly, I am going to go over to the team to introduce themselves and tell us how they are this morning. Gemma, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I am very well. I suppose I'm looking forward to this chat today. Because I suppose I started working with Amy and hearing all about where her interests are now and trying to improve her nutrition previously for her performance and some of the insights that she shared on her journey so far with it all. And it's just been incredible to kind of watch even the small changes that she mentioned that she's put in place. So I think this will be a really interesting chat just to see how powerful it can be when we take which is what was mentioned there before. This is just taking the small steps to see how powerful it can be in terms of where it can bring us forward.
And before we move on, Gemma, do you want to give us a bit of an insight to how you're feeling after your game at the weekend?
uh, well, my voice still isn't properly back yet. And I think today was the first day I woke up feeling somewhat refreshed. So, no, it's been an incredible weekend, and I think I'm really starting to reflect on it now properly and see things in a different way. It was really hard to it was really kind of hard to put it into words or to articulate in any way straight after it, but it's sitting nicely now and looking at it, and I suppose it's just a memory now that I have that I'll never forget, and I think there's loads of positives to take from it. And yeah,
What did you actually win?
the All Ireland Cup final. So it was the first year where the two leagues came together and put a competition in place. So I suppose there's a bit of history there in the making where they hope to continue this now for the foreseeable future, where for the first time ever the two leagues have come together, like north and south of the border. So I think it sets a scene for the football in all of Ireland, the whole island. So yeah, it was fantastic for us for Galway United to win it. The fact it's that their own first season in the league is under the umbrella of Galway United as well. So yeah, it's been
That's very cool. A pattern that I have seen very clearly established over the last couple of years with team sport is after the highs of a season or after a big win, whether it be All Irelands or European Cups, athletes tend to get sick. And it was kind of interesting seeing, oh, you shared a screen grab of somebody's recovery on Whoop. Was
my
that
own.
yours? Was that yours?
Yeah.
Give us a bit of an insight there.
Um, yeah, like that's very, very rare. After I've never had it was 1% on whip, and there's like my HRV was incredibly low, but I didn't put any recovery strategies in place after that game. I might have had a drink or whatever, but it's probably the first time I've ever just completely neglected it. Just the celebrations took over. And you can see the impact of it. The fact, like, even it's a couple of days, I never really experienced that length of time before I actually feel okay again. So lack of sleep, inappropriate nutrition strategies, like so. Um, it just really shows you the importance of the immediate impact of post exercise recovery, and getting that on board as quickly as possible, and doing all the right things, and experiencing what it's like to not do them is rough. And yeah, if I was back in training, I would not have been able to perform effectively at all, or even think clear. I've noticed my speech and everything has been been off the past couple of days.
Yeah. Aoife, do you want to tell us how you are, how you're getting on? How are things going?
Yeah, yeah, I'm all good, thank God. I'm looking forward to this chat with Amy now because I suppose a big part of my role since I started working with Dave Nutrition is developing our return to play injury recovery program. So I'm looking forward to hearing how Amy's getting on with her
Great.
recovery.
Yeah, it's how we don't overwhelm Amy with all of the information is the big thing, and how you kind of drip feed it. Myself and Eva were just talking about periodized nutrition, and one of the things we're going to be talking about with Amy is the periodized approach to nutrition, depending on the recovery demands and the intensity of rehab, or the intensity as that, if you're matching those needs to giving yourself the best possible recovery. Eva, did that hit a bit of a note with you this morning?
Yeah, big time. So we had a great conversation this morning, but even from our side today, I'm really looking forward to hearing from your Amy, your perspective of how you're finding working through that program. But ultimately, it's not just injury and nutrition for injury, but it's the development of your skills and your habits as well. So we always talk about this, but as a team, but actually to get an athlete on and to hear you speak about it, it's always nice to hear the other perspective and what your thoughts and processes are behind it. So it'd be great.
So Amy, we finally got to you. I told you there was going to be a bit of a spiel first. We love to talk this end. Tell us, I suppose, tell us a little bit first, Amy, about what type of, before you got injured, what type of training you're doing, what you're competing in terms of distance, and I suppose where your head was at before you got injured.
Yeah, so things were actually going really well. I think that's the really frustrating part. So 2021, I ran my PB and I moved up to Dublin, and I started getting like a trickle of like niggles, and I just wasn't able to compete properly that summer. I missed the cross country season of 2021. I missed the indoor season of 2022, the outdoor season of 2022, just with little injuries, niggles, COVID, all that kind of stuff. So this was the first year since 2021 that I had really started to get some consistency. I had an Achilles problem, which really I had it since 2016 on and off, but it really kind of affected 2022. So got all that sorted. I got second at the Nationals indoors. So I was like, okay, this is great. Like, I'm really kind of coming back. And then outdoors started, and same thing, like took a while to get into the swing of things. But in June, I ran a second off my outdoor personal best. So the plan was to peak in July. So my training, which is even more frustrating, we weren't even in like the real like high end of training, because like the nationals are this month, and all the kind of tougher races were July and then into August. So the goal was to peak in July. And unfortunately now I'm in a boot. But yeah, things were actually going really well. I was like enjoying racing again, because I think it's hard once you've been out of racing for a while to get back into that. Actually, the only way you're going to do that is through racing practice. So I was actually really starting to enjoy it again. Because the last 2 years were quite bumpy, and it's frustrating having like getting nothing out of your training. It's not like there was like a little break or like a little glimmer of hope. It was like 2 years of like, oh, this is just a bit shit. And so I was finally getting back into it, and this happened. So yeah.
Well, we can feel the frustration.
Yeah.
It's really, really mentally tough. Can you describe for people who are watching what kind of training you would do in a typical week, or what type of demands are on your body as you prepare for those peaks in the season, as you described?
Yeah, so the mileage would be a little bit less, like bang in the middle of race season. But let's say now in April, we were in Portugal at a training camp. So a Monday would be like 7 miles and gym. And then a Tuesday would be a session, and you could be covering anywhere between 7 to 10 miles, depending on if it was a longer session, a shorter session. And that could be tempo work or on the track. So Tuesday is kind of the big days. Tuesday and Saturday would be the two kind of key sessions. So then Wednesday is 7 miles in gym. It's the same as Monday. And then Thursday, if you had the chance to be in Portugal on training camp, you might like do a double day. So you run in the morning and run in the evening. And again, that would be tempo or like a kind of a steady pace. So it's not as intense as a track session, but it's harder than a kind of easy running. And then Friday would normally be your rest day, and then Saturday would also be like a big session, so maybe a track session, and then Sunday we'd have our long run, and that's 10 miles. So yeah, that would be like a typical week coming into the season.
And Amy, what's your distance? What distance do you run?
So I'm 800 and 1500, so middle distance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And also for my event, like I would be considered like low mileage. I would be on the lower end of the scale just because I would be an injury prone runner. So we have to kind of just make sure that we try and don't tip over the edge. So I would have even been on the lower end of the scale. Like I wouldn't have even been on the mileage. Like the top mileage I've ever gotten to is 50 miles a week. And maybe like 2021, kind of around COVID time when we actually had time to do everything, like that's when I would have been consistently running that. Whereas for the last year, it's been like 45-ish, and I might have hit 50 like once or twice, maybe 3 times, I'd say, this year.
I'll probably do that in a year. That's serious going.
Yeah. You're supposed to get used to it. And even like with the school I'm in, there's 3 of us that train together, you know, so it's nice. Like after school on Monday, we just go straight to running and straight to the gym. So it's nice. You don't have to think about it, you know.
How proactive are you when you describe that type of training and those type of demands? How proactive are you around your recovery? And what does that feel like on your body to put yourself under that kind of physical strain?
It's actually funny that you were talking about the Whoop, because since I got the Whoop, I've improved in my sleep a lot, because before that I was like 1 a.m. every, like that was just the time I went to sleep at. And I've always kind of been like that since a child. But then when I kind of started working, that had to change because I had to get up early. I didn't have a choice. So I think I would always try and nap where I could. Like I'd be really strict about like trying to nap, and then my sleep has gotten better. I suppose I'd be able to see with the Whoop like how my recovery was. And I'd be quite strict as well with my recovery around training. So like I'd always eat properly before training, and then I'd always make sure and have like my recovery drink after a hard session, and then go home and have food. You know, I'd always try and like make sure that I'd always have the recovery in the back of my head after training, because I know the importance of it. So yeah, I would be quite good with that.
Gemma and Amy, I might let you have a bit of a conversation about, I suppose, putting priorities in place and what maybe some of the things that you can share about that experience. So Gemma, I'll hand it over to you, and where, I suppose, what kind of information that you needed from Amy to understand those demands.
Yeah, so a lot of what I suppose that's where we started with our conversation was what Amy just described there in terms of her training load. And there was a lot of there was so much from it that you were doing really well in terms of your recovery, and the fact that there was emphasis on just recognizing the importance of nutrition, and the fact that sleep has changed for you. And I think I suppose where we started then was just looking at key nutrients. I think there was good in terms of like the structure that we talked about, and the importance of regular meals to ensure that we're getting enough supportive nutrition to support the training load that you're doing. But I think the biggest thing was probably identifying key nutrients that we wanted to improve upon. That one of them was the big thing that came out of our conversation, was just highlighting the importance of protein, the total amount in the day, and how we can look at ensuring that that's within each meal, and potentially the snacks that we were consuming, just kind of switching them around. But I suppose that was where we kind of started, and in terms of variety and trying to include a bit more variety in terms of our meals and get a bit more creative with them, so that we could include some extra micronutrients from, you know, additional fruit and veg and spices and things like that. So I think from what you had in place was brilliant, and it was just building upon that. and fitting in as much as we can that's going to be supportive for the recovery process. And yeah.
How did you feel about it, Amy?
I was going to ask.
Sorry.
I was actually so happy after, because like the one thing I was scared about was that I'd feel so overwhelmed, like especially starting from like the bottom, like of like learning about it and like all about nutrition, cooking. Like I really was like, oh God, I hope I don't come off this being like I have like so much to do. And that was the one thing I found with Gemma. Like she just started off and was like, okay, like we're going to focus on this one thing, like the protein, like getting more protein into your day, and that is what I want you to focus on. So I was like, great, I have this one thing to focus on, like you can't mess that up, it's just one thing. So that was really nice. And even just like all the stuff online, like it's just so interesting, and it's really broken down. Because I feel like before, like when I first kind of like started to get interested in like, okay, like performance nutrition, like what can I do to improve my performance, and you're just like reading all this stuff, but it's so hard to take it all in. Whereas when it's broken down into little chunks, it's actually like so interesting, and you're like, okay, I can do this and just focus on this one thing.
I think that's huge. Like I was thinking about that yesterday, is that, you know, when you're reading even research on supplements, and you can go down a rabbit hole of getting really detailed information and think this is classic, this is the next new thing that you need to kind of implement. But I think when you take a step back and see like the journey of nutrition, and you mentioned performance nutrition, like it's like well at the end of the spectrum in terms of what we can put in place to support performance. Whereas if we kind of take that step back and look at where we're actually at in our journey and see that, okay, it is the priorities for me right now potentially could be just supporting my energy needs. And then it's the next step is, okay, let's look at key macronutrients. And it's taking that step by step and breaking it down, like you said, so that it is appropriate for where we are in our journey. And then the next step is just recognizing, okay, what potentially now is missing, but is also in line with the priority of where I'm at.
Amy, can I ask you a quick question? With the process before even your first conversation with Gemma, how confident were you in your own nutrition strategy? Was there anything that you're like, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right? And kind of what has been the biggest kind of influence, or what have you really changed that you found of benefit from a fueling and a recovery perspective?
Well, I think the main thing for me was the cooking, and the fact that I was like starting from scratch and couldn't really do it or understand it. I think that was like the big thing for me. I was like, I know that I need to learn about performance nutrition, and I know I need to understand it, but like I never did anything food related in school and college, so I genuinely didn't know anything about it. I hated science in school. I like just didn't enjoy anything like that. So I feel like I knew there was obviously this big area that had such an important role in sport, but that I didn't know anything about. So eventually, I feel like as I got older, maybe I eventually started to like develop an interest into performance nutrition and how it would impact you. And I feel like I always had this thought in my head that I wouldn't enjoy it or wouldn't enjoy learning about it, that it would just be like a bit of a slog. But I think the fact that I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting and I'm enjoying this made such a big difference. Like I'm enjoying learning about like this, and like, oh, why I should have my protein and so on. So I think that was a big thing, like that I actually, not that I was like afraid I wouldn't enjoy it, but I was like, oh, actually this is not like a big science lesson. This is actually like just really simple stuff that everyone, not even performance people, like everyone should actually know about. And I kind of wanted to know, like, okay, like, because even with my friends and who I live with, like, and they're like, no, like it's just really simple. There's little simple things you can do, and I thought it was going to be like this big, this big thing that I would have to learn. Whereas like now I know, oh, there's actually some really just simple things that you can do to improve your nutrition.
And have you found that even the changes that you've made have been a positive influence on your performance, and that kind of propels you to keep going with it? Or have you noticed any significant changes?
Yeah, I even like just implementing the protein, like I would say my energy levels definitely improved. But I suppose like we were only getting into the swing of this, and when I tell you I I have been staring at the walls of my house. Like I'm doing nothing. Like yesterday was the first day in probably 3 weeks that I did any bit of exercise. So I don't really, I haven't really had the chance to utilize it. But like in a way, it's actually nice because now that I have like free time, like that I literally am doing nothing, I'm like, okay, now I can actually practice so that by the time I'm back training, I'll be able to implement everything a lot quicker.
Amy, can I ask, it's probably a bit off topic now, but was there ever any emphasis placed on nutrition from coaches, say, or anyone else apart from a nutritionist when you were training?
Yeah, so with my event, and kind of more, I would say, middle distance and long distance running, there's a huge problem with like reds, and like under fueling. That would be a big thing. So I feel like since we were teenagers, that has really been emphasized on us, like the importance of fueling properly so that you can, get the most out of your training. We would have had nutrition workshops and stuff like that when we were young. But I suppose that would be maybe like once a year. So like you're focusing on it like once a year. And I suppose the message from coaches, physios, all that is just to make sure that you're eating enough. That would be across the board. I think like the last however many years I've ran, I feel like for my event, the emphasis is always on like just make sure you're fueling properly. And then I suppose the signs of that, like, is making sure that you have, regular periods. That would be a big sign. Like, and then if anything, like if girls start to lose their periods, then it's like, okay, now you need to see if you're fueling properly or you need to up your intake. So yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I would have ever noticed is just like make sure you're eating enough.
Amy, it is a little bit of a change in direction in the conversation, but I think it's one that's it's worth having. What do you think about the challenge of communicating a message around fueling and body image?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is something that does come up quite a bit. And how have you managed to process the need for energy and body image in your own head?
Yeah, I think like not at my age, but I think from maybe 15 onwards, 15 to maybe like your early 20s, I would say that's a tough period because like you're changing, your environment's changing. So for me, after secondary school, I went to college in America. So I was like very, very naive to like just be, I'd never like lived away from home or anything like that. And the next thing I was in a college where every single day you have unlimited access to any type of food. You can have pizza for breakfast, and as someone who loves food, that was like not good for me. Like, and I put on a stone when I went to Arkansas, which I mean, it's not really a big deal, but in running, it is. You have an ideal race weight, and you do have to stick to that. And I actually really, really struggled to get that off. It's probably at that time, it's the worst relationship I've ever had with food. And I think it is quite common for girls to struggle around that time when you go into college and there's a lot of change going on. And like, you're discovering socializing and stuff a lot more. But I'd say for me, definitely the worst relationship I ever had with food was about 18, 19, where then the shift kind of changed to like, well, I need to lose weight rather than what here is impacting my performance or how can I fuel performance. So I think that period of time was definitely tough because I was actually injured then as well. So like I was, trying to navigate, and I was only 18, so I was really trying to navigate a lot of different things. Then I think it's funny, what I found over the years is the minute that you stop thinking about it in that way. So for me, I was obsessed with like, I need to get back down to my race weight, and probably doing it all like the wrong way. And then the minute I actually like let go of it, it just, came back. Like I got back to my race weight. I was doing the proper things, but I wasn't like actively thinking about it. And I could safely say like, the topic of conversation amongst runners is often food, weight, periods, all that kind of stuff. So it's a huge one to navigate, I think.
Do you feel like at that time you had the support network around you to help with that, or are you guys kind of left on your own accord and figure it out, have a nutrition workshop once a year? Or did you feel like you had the network around you, or was it just the talk was around weight, food, and solve it yourself?
No, not in America. And I think that that's maybe because you're in such, it's huge. It's like a business over there. Like, you know, you're on a scholarship, you're there to do a certain thing. So the emphasis was kind of on getting you back to do that certain thing rather than an understanding of diet. So no, I definitely didn't at that age. Now, as I got older and came back to Ireland, like, yeah, of course, like the support was there from my parents. And my parents were great in helping me to just get back to my race weight, we'll say, and maybe kind of change my mindset around it. But no, I definitely don't think there's enough emphasis on it. And again, that was 10, 12 years ago. So there was no Instagram, there was no iPhones, whereas now it's like, it's great that, like, you know, even though you're utilizing Instagram to share that information with people, like the information is out there now, you know, and it's so easy to access. Whereas I feel like back then it probably wasn't as accessible, or it wasn't as easy to just jump on your phone and go on Instagram and kind of look at posts and stuff.
I think getting to that stage where you mentioned that there was just, once you started to take the focus away from body composition and actually look at things in terms of how to optimize performance, like that's, because I can relate to that, even thinking about similar experiences where there is just that moment where you start to see that, if I actually just focus on eating the right foods that are going to help me with my recovery, with my performance in the pitch, like there's so much in that can start to change your perspective on things. But it's really hard to, like, for you, is there anything that you can associate that brought you to that feeling, that brought you to that experience of shifting the perspective?
No, I honestly think it was just time. And I suppose maybe when I was going through the injury, like that, it was just frantic. Like there was an injury, there was weight gain, there was just like a lot. And when you're so far away from home, I think it was kind of in winter when I was injured, and then as we kind of got into spring and into summer, I suppose you're just out and about more. Like you're out in the sun, you're in a better routine. And I suppose that probably lifted my mood a bit, and then that kind of just trickled into everything else. But it is hard when you're really, like, you know, when you're injured and you're trying to like navigate everything. I feel like it is really hard to just switch your mind. I think it kind of comes over time. And then like a little glimmer of like, you're like, oh, this is working, and then it kind of just goes from there.
Yeah.
Amy, I was talking to the team about an athlete who I had a conversation with yesterday, who was following something incredibly restrictive in order to get his weight down. And what you described is, I'm not going to say it's word for word, but the similarities are just incredible to listen to in it being a process of realization. And for him, it was realizing the benefits of eating a certain way on how he felt, and beginning to recognize, you mentioned mood. I couldn't believe you mentioned mood there, because, and even the sun and things like that, because all of this is connected. If we can recognize those variables and how those elements and factors in our life make us feel, then we have a far better understanding of the things that are actually going to impact our performance. And there is more negative actions associated with food. We don't, the awareness needs to grow over time of the negative impact of those. It's great if there was a light bulb moment, but it is recognizing there is an awful lot more positive aspects of eating in this way for how I feel versus eating this way to try and reduce our weight, which is incredibly negative. And it's a very hard thing to communicate. You know, it's hard to communicate that, but listening to you and how well you've delivered that, I think there's going to be huge value in people hearing an athlete who has gone through that explain it. So bring us up to recently when you got injured. What is the injury, and is there any kind of understanding of what has led to it?
The thing that I'm really finding hard to process about this is I don't have a reason for why it happened. I have not had a bone injury since 2013. So even when I was training a lot harder than I am now. So basically what happened was, I would say kind of towards the end of May, I got a little pain in my foot, thought it was tightness, was running through it, racing through it, and it gradually just became more like there. Like the pain did not change, but I was like, yeah, no, it's just there. I didn't really have to change my training much. And I was still racing. Like I ran my fastest time in nearly 2 years. But I remember after I ran that was in England, and I was like, you know what, I just want to come home and get this sorted because there's something going on in my foot. It's not going away. It's been like at that point, I'd say it had been about 2 weeks. And I was like, you know, if it was muscle or something that, you know, it would maybe be changing or like not lingering. And basically, to cut a long story short, I was running through it. The pain never went over a 2 out of 10. And I don't have a crazy pain threshold. Like I'm very normal pain threshold, and I'm extremely cautious. Like even all of my friends were just like so shocked because of anyone, you know, I actively like try and run on grass and not on concrete to prevent these kind of injuries. I wear Hokas, I wear orthotics. So yeah, eventually I actually took it upon myself to get a scan just to make sure everything was okay. And at this point, everyone was still like, not bone, it's definitely not bone. No way it'll be bone. And then I got the results of the scan, and I have a stress reaction in my 5th metatarsal. And I have to get a CT scan to make sure that there isn't a crack. And if there's a crack, I have to get surgery. So it's so like hard to process that something that caused me a little bit of disruption, and the pain never went over a 2 out of 10, has now caused me to be in a walking boot and like worst case scenario, like surgery. So yeah, that's kind of what's been going on. Like I would say the last day I did a session, it was probably one of my best sessions of the season. So like when I did that, I was like, I couldn't warm down after it, and that was the first time that I was like, this is impacting me now. And then the next day I got the results, and I was like, oh, okay, that's why. So
how are you processing it?
I think that the hardest thing is just like, first of all, the fact that I had been coming back from injury over the last 2 years, and like the fact that I don't have a solid reason for it. But my theory is like, I don't know if any of you have heard of like the carbon fiber plated shoes in running.
Yeah.
So they're what like Eliud Kipchoge would have won the marathon in, and you know how I would describe them is you almost feel like you're cheating because they give you a big boost. Like my times in carbon fiber plated shoes, if I'm doing an easy run, if I was doing them in normal shoes, I might be running 8-minute miles. And if I was doing them in those, I would be running 7 45-minute miles.
Wow. But
feeling the same thing. Feeling the exact same. Like they're really, really great. But what I did is I started off and I was like, you know what, I'll wear them for my long run because my heart rate is so low. And then like I was doing long runs, my heart rate was 129. Wow. You know? So I was like, well, I must be saving so much energy. And I slowly but surely started implementing them more and more into my week. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm tired today, I'll wear them, you know, because they're recovery shoes. But some of my friends wear them every single day. And I know people that wear them all the time and have never had problems. But I've been actually reading about them, and there's studies coming out now that there's an increase in stress fractures in the navicular, that they're noticing that. Because I suppose they are relatively new. So I think that maybe my running gait just doesn't suit them. And I was still changing between different shoes. And I also, right before it happened, I was like in UCD, I was running, and you know, the kind of trail around the outside, I was doing like fast stuff, and there's a lot of weaving. And same thing in UL, there was soccer, the Gaynor Cup was on, so I was doing a lot of kind of weaving in and out. That's kind of what I think would have maybe triggered it. And then obviously I ran through it for a month.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, having a mechanical shift and you're still running at a high intensity. So if there's something there where you've got a repeated strain, then it's possible that it could have impacted you in that way. I guess it is a process of elimination. Moving forward now, Amy, a big thing, and this is one of the reasons why we're talking. A big thing when I've been working with athletes, about 5 years ago, in Leinster, there was a big shift in the mindset of the organization. So the whole backroom team had a big shift towards injured athletes. So if someone was managing a medium to long term injury, there was a big change in the process around it. So believe it or not, it was exactly like this. So the athlete would come to speak to the entire backroom team. There'd be a coach, the nutritionist, the S&C, the physio, the medics, and everybody would come together. Now you're just with a team of nutritionists, but everybody would come together to try and create a priority list for that athlete so that it would give them a sense of structure, process, and key areas or work-ons. And it had just the most astonishing impact on athletes' return to play times. And it wasn't actually that the information changed. It was that the athlete was engaged in a very different type of process. So you mentioned the cooking earlier, and it was all, where's the opportunity here? How do we get back? How do we support you to get back to a position where you are better placed to perform? And if we think about that, there's multiple layers to it in team sport. But for you mentioned cooking, and we believe that evolving your nutrition even during this phase could be a real asset to you.
Like I had said to Gemma, and I know it's so bad, this is such a bad way of thinking, but when I, saw that I had to go in the boot and that meant nothing, no exercise, my first thought was, well, now I just need to not put on weight. And I know that that's so bad, but like it's such an easy thing to happen. So my initial thought wasn't what's the best way to eat to help my injury. It was what do I need to cut out of my diet so that I don't gain weight. And I know that it's just like, that's so bad, but I feel like a lot of athletes would probably have that same mindset. And because it's more like, well, if I put on weight, then I'll have to, get back from being injured while also trying to do that. So I was like, if I can just prevent that from happening, then that'll be fine. But I know now that that's obviously silly, and that, your first thing you should be doing is like, okay, well, how can I help my body recover without restricting myself? So I think that's like my main priority now. It's not to like make sure that I don't gain weight, but rather to heal my health body.
Exactly. Gemma, do you want to go through some of the priorities?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a common, I suppose, initial thought you hear quite often. I'd hear and again, even in the team as well, my own team. But I suppose whenever you can, the same as you have that shift previously in your life where you're looking at your priorities for performance, it's just to kind of shift in that perspective now to this is the phase that we're in right now, and there's ways that we can deal with this and to put you in the best position possible when you are back. I suppose the priorities then is just looking at there's an adjustment in energy needs, but it's not a significant decrease in terms of overall calories. But again, key priorities is going to be from a nutrient perspective, ensuring you're still hitting your total daily protein intake. supporting that with still including carbohydrates, like complex carbohydrates, rich in fiber, your micronutrients, getting plenty of fruit and veg throughout the day within your regular meals, because that's going to help with even the inflammation process, so reducing or increasing antioxidants there from lots of different colors, omega-3s, so again for the inflammatory process as well. So things like salmon, I think you mentioned you liked salmon, you had that a lot. So including things like that, nuts, seeds, oils, so increasing your fatty acid intake there as well. And I think when you kind of put a couple of key nutrients in front of you to identify, it helps to put those within your meals throughout the day then, and you can kind of look at your plate and say, okay, I know that these are my key priorities in terms of nutrients, and it's how to put that into a meal that's going to be appetizing and appealing to you to consume as well. And I think knowing a couple of those things and then incorporating that into the cooking process as well can be helpful. I suppose the phase that you're going through now as well, you know, we're less active. You really want to be just kind of be making sure that we're limiting the loss of lean mass as much as possible, and that will come from obviously an effective rehab program. But it's that protein intake is really going to support muscle protein synthesis. So ensuring that we're still potentially increasing protein intake. So anywhere up to between, you know, it could be up to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it's just more so looking at, you know, for slightly increasing it and really focusing on, you know, between 25 to 30 grams of protein. So in every meal, and ensuring that that is a daily total target. That focus can really help to kind of reduce that loss of lean mass. So that's going to be massive whenever you get back to training again, that we're really trying to limit that loss.
Yeah. And then obviously for bone injuries, would you say there's anything in particular compared to other injuries? Is there anything that you would say for bone injuries is extremely helpful?
The main principles that were mentioned there is still going to be number one priority. So there's not a huge amount of, you know, you can look at ensuring that you're getting appropriate vitamin D and calcium intake throughout your diet from your dairy products. But when you focus on the likes of, let's say protein intake, you're supporting lean mass, you're supporting bone health. And from the foods that you choose, you know, if they are rich in dairy products, you're also getting the likes of your vitamin D and calcium within that. Is there anything else anyone else wants to mention within that? I suppose for me, that like those would be the key principles, and it's how you incorporate that into your life is going to be the biggest thing, because you could look at specific things, potential research in certain areas in terms of supplements, but it's how much of the main priorities are we getting into your life consistently each day. So what does your process look like on a day-to-day basis, and how many of those boxes could we tick from you know, each of those meals? You know, again, going back to protein, what does each of your meals look like? Are you meeting those within your breakfast, lunch, your dinner? And yeah, I suppose it's about setting your day up to kind of show yourself that you're getting those things on board. Is there anything, even just looking at your own process right now, is there anything that or I suppose, what does it look like for you at the minute in terms of, you know, going through that phase and knowing that there's a bit of shift now? And
I suppose initially it was more just like trying, like, say in the morning, if I was having porridge and toast, then I was like, okay, maybe I just won't have the toast this morning, and trying to reduce carbs. That's kind of what I was mainly doing. But I was still eating my meals. I was still having breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe like toast or cereal before I go to bed or something. But yeah, I definitely think I'm still trying to get my protein in. I still kind of make sure to have like those protein yogurts and you know, for a snack any chance I can. And to be honest, I feel like I thought that I might, like, you know, want to pig out or like kind of like emotionally eat, but I actually haven't really had the like need to do that, which I thought would also be a part of the process. But no, I think, to be honest, like I'm still trying to eat as healthy as I can, and just, I suppose, make sure that I'm getting in what I need to get in, but also trying to make sure that I'm just cutting back a little bit.
That's really good, and Gemma has covered it all there from a nutrition point of view. I'm going to just go back to the process part. You mentioned, looking at the walls, and that's really common. You're a teacher and you're off for the summer, isn't it? So a big thing was recognizing that your mood and your emotional state and how you're feeling, how you're processing, and that's why I was saying how you're dealing with it has a big impact on your decisions. So what are the building blocks, or what are the rituals that you can still do as part of your day, and looking at your day and going, this phase is learning, this phase is cooking, this phase is downtime, this phase is it could be watching something related to your sport, unrelated to your sport. And it is those activities that create a sense of purpose, and it's recognizing that mood is a big thing. Like Gemma covered, like what matters is energy, meeting your macronutrients, the structure, timing of your meals, the density, so to help support or reduce or manage inflammation. And then there's the small elements within adequate vitamin D and adequate vitamin C, which a good diet will cover. And then, you can talk about collagen as well as a potential way of supporting bone healing, but you're getting into the smaller percentages and fractions. It's more, what is that process? And Gemma has a really interesting story about the time that she got injured, what she did outside of sport.
Ron.
Yeah, I've only ever had one, thankfully, touch wood, one significant injury that put me out of some important games. And I was really lucky to have somebody, a coach that I suppose took some extra steps to support me and speak to me and, give me some tips on things to do and take my mind off. I suppose I was young as well, so all I was thinking about was the sport, and this was gone from my life. So as to have somebody kind of highlight that there's other important things that you can build upon, to skills that you can build, or creative things. He knew that I was interested in art and music and creative things, so he just didn't tell me to do anything, but just to kind of tap into that a bit more. And we were doing a school project, and one of the things I got into was like sewing and embroidery. So but I took this to a whole other level, and I was watching YouTube videos, and my granny had like all these patterns that I was trying to use. So yeah, I got really into that, and I created like it was part of a project, and it ended up going into a competition and doing well. And but for me, that completely took my mind off what I was going through. And yeah, like it was just interesting and something to do as part of that process. And alongside of that, I was still doing the training and the whatever I could do with my sport, but I wasn't dwelling on what I suppose eventually got to the stage where I wasn't dwelling on what I was going through, and that for me was massive. And like I still have the picture, and like every time I go home, it's like sitting on my wall. So it's yeah, it's a nice reminder. But
It's going now.
no, I haven't done it in a while. I would fix things like people, like even my housemates have given me a couple of things to fix in their trousers and stuff. But yeah, it's not.
It's a nice skill to have.
Yeah, I suppose it's fine. It was just the whole idea of it was just the fact that you're doing something that's helping you through that process. It could be absolutely anything. Like, for me, it could have been piano, or whatever. That was part of it as well. But yeah, it's mad what you can, once you kind of look at what's possible to do, to learn, to implement. Like, it could be cooking, it could be anything, but it's the power of what that can do whenever you kind of shift your mind away and see that there's other things that can be built here. And this,
Amy, what comes to your mind when you hear about Gemma sewing and playing piano? Is there anything that comes to your mind that you could be doing?
I might send her up a few things to fix, actually. No, that's impressive. The sewing is a good one. I think teach that in school.
Yeah. But I think we've covered a huge amount. There's an amazing amount of really valuable information around injury, around everything from your mindset and how it's evolved. And you speak incredibly well, and you're very good at communicating thoughts and experiences. And I think that there's a lot of people who are watching this. Uh, I suppose it could be anybody, but I'm particularly excited about young athletes hearing this information. And I'm also really excited. I'd like to talk to you again as this evolves further. You know, I feel like you're at a stage where you've learned a lot. You're managing this injury now, but the thing that excites us is that this continues to evolve. This is just a point in time, and you've had these number of experiences and realizations, and it's really exciting to see where this can go.
Yeah, but even for me, like even with Gemma, what you were saying there about the sewing, like I actually think when you were talking about that, I was like, I think for me that's actually cooking. And like if you had said last year, like even if you'd said that to my friends that I was cooking, they'd be like, shut up. Like even when I tell them now, I'm like, guess what? I was cooking last night. They're like, what? So like I think for me now that that's actually cooking and I have this time to learn about it and practice it, I feel like before, like when you're training, like the last thing you want to do is go home and cook. Whereas now that I'm actually learning how it's convenient and it's not this big, hard, scary thing, it's actually easy and it's actually quite interesting and fun. And again, that's just going to continue now, it's really nice. So thanks to all of you for that, because I feel like that's thanks to you that I have learned to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's you, Amy. But there's no doubt it's nice to have conversations about it, and it's nice to realize that, as you talked about, as Gemma would have broken it into priorities and chunks for you, but it's really good to have heard it from you. We've taken up enough of your time. I just want to say a huge, huge thank you. Again, we're rooting for you. We're supporting you. We'll do it all we can to support you in your recovery, even if that's just encouragement and little bits of information. Anything from the girls before we wrap up?
Well, massive thanks for coming on, Amy. It was great to hear your insights and we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Really enjoyed that.
I have a consultation. So thanks very much, Amy. Really appreciate it.
You go, Eva. Gemma.
thanks, Amy, and can't wait to see what you cook.
Yeah.
You can send them on.
Amy, sincere thank you. Gemma is here. I'm here if you want to touch base. The only last thing that I really want to emphasize with you is that if you can think about a really clear reason and purpose to your cooking and to your nutrition and to the process and to the structure, if you can really clearly link the power and benefits of that to some specific things like you did before, that has a real measurable impact. So to re-emphasize, if you maintain, so when you're immobile or when a limb is immobilized in a boot, the rate of lean mass loss, so the rate of muscle mass loss is really significant, and it's really significant in the first 2 weeks in particular. So if you can help to retain some of that tissue, then you don't need to rebuild that tissue and that strength. And one of the fascinating things about ACL injuries and certain types of even cartilage injuries and joint injuries is that up to 2 years after injuries, we have still seen those deficits in strength and muscle in those limbs. So all of these things helped to manage that and help to reduce the amount of work that you need to do when you do come back, which shortens your return to playtime, or return to performance, I should say.
Yeah, and it's just like knowing and understanding that, I think, and being able to carry that with you day in, day out is so helpful. Than rather just going along and just kind of, you know, everything's a waiting game. Whereas, as you said, like that word purpose, I think once there's a purpose there and you're like, okay, I'm doing this to help this, like it makes it so much easier.
Really good. Well, thank you again. We are going to hang on. We have one other quick conversation to have on something else, but we're looking forward to staying in touch. And well done again. You spoke really, really well. Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Amy.
Amy.
Thank you. I am going to stop recording.